Press Play, the Real Resilience podcast, dedicated to all things reel-to-reel.
Hello and welcome to the Real Resilience podcast. My name's Ian Betson, and in this episode 0, the first one of our hopefully many more podcasts to come, I want to start afresh, rewind so to speak, and tell you more about Real Resilience, what it is, what it does, what it can do for you if you're a reel-to-reel enthusiast, whether you're an owner of many machines, a collector perhaps, or a studio using them to record new material or for archive transfer, or someone who just wants to look forward to pressing play on their first machine. So first off, a bit about me, and this will lead on to my take on why reel-to-reel has made such a comeback. As I said, my name's Ian Betson, and I started in my journey in professional audio on the 18th of January 1988. That was the date that I joined the BBC in the UK as a trainee studio engineer in radio. And I started at the BBC's training college in Worcestershire. And I was trained for 2.5 years or so on all aspects of professional audio in the BBC. So that was studios, that was recording processes, that was transmission, and also, because I used a lot of them, tape machines. I looked after many of the machines that they used in their new studios and at the various recording venues they had. Most of them were Studer machines, Studer A80s, A807s, A810s. In the offices, they had quite a lot of Revox machines, mainly PR99s. They also had some B67s as well, Studer B67s. I did a spell at the world-famous Maida Vale studios there, where I got exposure to the Studer A800 24-track machine and lots more A80s as well. And then I moved to their news department where they didn't use Studers. They liked the Telefunken M15A machine, mainly because, and although I'm still a Studer fan, the Telefunken at the time had much better edit capabilities, the way it could spool the tape backwards and forwards. News liked it because it's a lot of bang, 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 cutting news pieces for broadcast. And the Telefunken M15A was just the machine to do that. I then moved to local radio. The BBC has a chain of about 37 local radio stations dotted up and down the UK. I went to Radio Cambridgeshire and I was a station engineer there for 5 years. Local radio in the BBC doesn't have the range of equipment that the national radio services do in London. But we had a range of Studer B67s and PR99s from Revox. And then towards the end of my spell there, we were refitted with a lot of Studer A807s. So that will bring you up until about the mid-1990s, and I decided to have a change in the industry, and I left the BBC and I went to work on various other areas of professional audio, mainly in project management, in studio installations, and also working in the commercial sector. But one thing I didn't do in that time after I left the BBC was anything to do with open reel, with reel-to-reel tape machines. Because quite honestly, by the mid-90s, open reel was on its way out. No one wanted to know about the machines. And I hold my hands up to this, and it's something that I really regret. I actually had a whole range of the orange Studer maintenance manuals. I had the B67 Mark 1, the Mark 2, the A80 and the A807. And guess what? I threw them all away. No one wanted that kind of stuff. I nearly threw away a lot of the tools I had as well, because again, they were just sitting in my cupboard unused. But I hung on to those because typical engineer, typical techie type, you think, well, I never know when that will come in useful. So I did hang on to those. And that was it. For about 12 years, we're into sort of like the early 2000s by now, I didn't touch tape machines at all. And then, out of the blue, I started to get inquiries for tape machines. People saying, you used to work with these things, can you fix my machine? And I started to tinker around and think, yeah, that's something I can do. I quite enjoy this. Quite like the tactile approach of pressing play, seeing all the mechanics moving in, and hearing audio, which is my real first love, coming out of a pair of speakers from a piece of tape. So gradually over the last 10 years or so, since about 2010, I've been building up my business in open reel maintenance because I'm finding there's more and more inquiries from it. I think what's probably driven it is the vinyl resurgence. And as a result of that, bands who were requesting vinyl or analog sessions, I should say, in the recording studios. As a result, I was getting recording studios who had this dusty old multi-track, probably shoved in the back of the studio with a dust sheet, if it was lucky, left over it, hauling the thing out. And the analogy I use, it's a bit like a vintage car. You know, you've got this beautiful vintage car and it's sat in the garage for 10, 15 years unused, perhaps got a dust sheet on it, perhaps not. And you think, hey, I like my vintage car now, that's all come back in, I'm going to take it out for a spin. And you're really expecting that thing to fire up first time and you drive it straight the way down the road, enjoying yourself, perhaps with the roof down. Well, it ain't going to do that. It needs a lot of work to get it back on the road, even if it's sat there doing nothing. You know, you've got oil, you've got lubrication, you've got petrol, you've got air to put in the tyres. And it's exactly the same thing with these multi-track tape machines. You can't just press play, you can't just press record and expect the machine to burst back into life as it did perhaps 20 years ago. These things are electromechanical devices. They need the lubrication to keep the metal parts apart from each other. They need lining up. One of the jobs that I regularly used to do in my BBC days when I worked at Broadcasting House in Maida Vale was a thing that we called routine tape maintenance. Literally, on night shifts, we would go around and have to take a studio, and in that studio perhaps would be 4 Studio A80 machines. We'd have to line them up, to tweak them, to make sure that they replayed okay, to make sure they recorded okay, and most importantly, make sure that they looked after the tape, that they weren't running slow, they weren't running fast, or they just reduced the tape perhaps to a bootlace if one wheel went in one direction and one went in the other because there was a fault on them. So I'm getting these studios ring me up to say, Ian, we hear you know about tape machines. Could you come along and look at ours? Also finding the recording industry has, of course, discovered the value in the archive. All those old tapes they've got of artists who perhaps come back into popularity, re-release of various recording sessions from bygone times. They need the machines to replay those. And, of course, they need the machine perhaps that it was recorded on, perhaps wasn't in tipped-on condition then. I mean, everybody, as an aside, loves the sound of, the Motown sound. Well, a lot of that Motown sound was created by saturating tape. That crunchy drum sound that everybody loves from the 60s Motown sound was recorded, frankly, by overdriving the tape and saturating it. Well, you've got to have tape machines that were perhaps not running perfectly to speed when it was recorded. So therefore, when you play it back, you need to have your vari speed on your machine. Perhaps you had some with crazy track layouts. We hear about 2-track machines and mono machines and multi-track machines. Sometimes tapes are recorded on esoteric machines, like 16 tracks over 2-inch tape and things like that. So you've got to have the tape machine to replay those master tapes. So I was getting inquiries for those. Definitely in that case, the archive studios weren't interested in recording, but of course the machine had to look after that very valuable master tape and had to play it back to the best of its ability. So I'm getting interest there. Spool on a little bit further, and the rise of vinyl is then moving over into the consumer market where people love the analog sound, and of course they're starting to discover 2-track open reel machines. Whether that's the full-blown professional machines, which by now many of them have been pushed out into the second-hand marketplace because the studios didn't want them, or perhaps some of the consumer-based machines from the 1950s, 60s or 70s, be it valve or early transistor. I'm getting inquiries there. And I then noticed from about 2012, it almost went vertical in the number of inquiries I had, be it from private collectors, be it from studios, be it from people who are just interested, or the classic ones, I've got this tape machine, or we found this tape in the loft. It's of the kids, it's of the grandkids from about 20 years ago. We'd like to play it and hear what's on the tape. And then I really get a lot of inquiries through to look after these machines, fix them, maintain them, line them up. And so I already had my own company called AV Resilience, which was doing professional audio, project management, studio installations and other professional audio services to the recording and the broadcast markets here in the UK. And indeed internationally, I spent quite a lot of time abroad. I spent nearly a year in Norway building a TV and radio station. I've worked in India and I worked in Spain building radio and television stations. But AV Resilience is doing very well. But really, when people want to get tape machines and want to get their tape machines fixed, a little bit confusion. Ian, what are you actually doing? Are you installing studios? Are you maintaining your mixers? Or are you actually going to be fixing my tape machine? So as a result, I did a play on name. We've got avresilience.co.uk, which is the website that I use for my business. I have created realresilience.co.uk. And more a little bit about that later when I come on to talk about the website. And Real Resilience was born, an idea really born last year. It's coming to fruition in the last few months. And it is dedicated to the service, supply and indeed sales, because I do now get a lot of inquiries from people to say, can you get me a tape machine? Or indeed, I found this tape machine in the loft. You know, we don't need it for playing the kids' tape anymore. Could you, are you interested in buying it? Or do you know anybody that will be interested? Again, I don't want to come over as a sort of repository for tape machines and I'll buy any old machine and just rescue them all. I can't do that. We've only got so much money in this world, all of us have, and we've only got so much space. But I can perhaps hook people up and go, I know where such and such machine is for sale, don't know what its condition is, but perhaps you, Mr. Purchaser or Miss Purchaser, might be interested in buying it. So that is the essence of Real Resilience: to service, to maintain, to repair and to buy and sell reel-to-reel tape machines. I don't actually confine myself purely to reel-to-reel, but I do confine myself to analog tape. So you might find me working on cassette decks. Studer did a great range of cassette decks, and of course we've got the well-known Nakamichis as well. So basically, if it's tape, I'll work on it, but I don't get involved in the digital audio stuff. So I don't really get involved in DAT, much as I've got, I like the format and I've got a few machines, but I'm confining myself to the analog side. That's not to say that I didn't work on digital tape machines, open reel tape machines, in my days in the BBC. I remember the corporation used to use the Sony PCM 3324 dash format from Sony, and also the Mitsubishi X86 tape machine, which was a digital audio stationary head model, not of the same format as the dash from Sony, but still an open reel digital tape machine. Never got to work on Studer's range of digital machines. By then, I think they introduced that in about the mid-1990s. Tape was pretty much on the way out from 1992, and a lot of the major purchasers were just not making investments in tape machines anymore, preferring to move to digital. So, Real Resilience. Tell you a little bit about that. As I said, it was split off from AV Resilience. It has its own website. You can find it at realresilience.co.uk. Obviously, the domain extension gives it away. I'm based here in the United Kingdom still. Real Resilience, by the way, REELRESILIENCE. That's REELRESILIENCE.co.uk. So that's where you'll find the web presence. Got a Facebook page too. You can go to Facebook and dig around and find Real Resilience. Again, just look for it on the Facebook pages and you'll find some entries there. I'm not tweeting at the moment. I don't find there's too much demand for it, though I will probably be using some of the other more visual-based social media as time goes by. On the website, there is the opportunity to sign up for a newsletter. I have put a newsletter out in the past, and I had a dedicated following on that newsletter. However, last year here in Europe, if you're listening outside of Europe, we had a thing called GDPR, General Data Protection Record, I think it is, which was basically meant that we couldn't just get someone's email address off their website and just send them some information and go, hi, a little bit about me. We had to have proper sign-ins. We had to have proper opt-ins to our mailing list. As a result, my newsletter record, I sent out all to my list prior to all the regulations coming in saying, hi, do you still want my newsletter? And I probably probably got about 25% back to say, yeah, I would still like to keep your newsletter. That's not to say the other 75% weren't interested. Perhaps they just missed the emails in their inbox or whatever and never responded. But to comply with the law, I could only go with those 25% that I originally had on my mailing list. So as a result, that list has been massively cut down. And quite honestly, with the increase in tape machine business I haven't, hands up, put the attention to the newsletter that it deserves. But what I'm hoping, allied with this podcast, I'm going to reactivate the newsletter. As I said, on the website, you can sign up for it, enter your email address, you can opt in, and I'll add you to the mailing list. And it will be a combination of handy tips. Basically is what it is already. It's not a great long newsletter, but handy tips, stuff I'm working on, and just various aspects of open reel ownership and the operation of the way reel-to-reel recorders do their stuff. So, yeah, that's the newsletter. You can contact me. I still use the AV Resilience email address just to keep things simple so I don't get too many inboxes and miss your emails. So if you need to get hold of me or want to pick my brains, because quite honestly, I'm happy to give information out about open reel machines. I mean, to a good example of that, on the website, if you go to the download section and put your email in there, there is some documents, and I'm adding to them as and when I can, but some documents, all PDFs to download, about aspects of open reel machines. So you've got things such as how can I tell if I've got headwear on the heads on my machine and whether my heads are okay or shot. I've got a document on there about audio levels. There is a lot of talk on the various forums about dBs, flux levels, VUs. I've got a document on there about that, and I'm just in the process of writing one about what to look for in buying your first reel to reel. So you can go onto the website and put your email address into the download section and get access to that. If you want to contact me personally, though, you can email me. Use the AV Resilience email address, and that is info@avresilience.co.uk. So that's info@avresilience.co.uk. So that's all one word, avresilience.co.uk. So use that email address to get in contact with me, and I do reply. I can't say I'm like a live chat line. I don't respond instantly. I'm afraid, we're all busy in this world, but I would do my best to get in touch with you within a reasonable period of time, perhaps a couple of days, and respond to your inquiry. So what I hope to do over the next few episodes of this podcast is talk, as I said, about all aspects of open reel ownership, why people like open reel. I've touched on why my view as to why open reel has come back. We're going to talk about the technical sides of open reel. A question, what is bias? What is AC bias? Why is it different to DC bias? Why do we have bias? Balanced audio. I've got a professional machine with balanced outputs. Can I plug it into my RCA coax inputs on my amplifier? Can I drive that amplifier to record material onto tape, onto my professional machine? And what level should I be looking at? We're going to cover all of those things. Tensions on tape machines, the differences between domestic and professional machines and different manufacturers. I've touched, of course, on Studio and Revox, machines I know well and still love, but I've also in my time worked on machines from Ewer, most of the 4000 series, report series the BBC used for its reporters. I've worked on those. Lyrec, Fred and Frida, they were a Danish machine manufacturer, if I remember, that I think Fred stood for Free Edit. They were used by journalists in the field. Aforementioned Telefunkens. And recently, with the upturn of private clients and studios requesting my services, I've worked on Atari machines, further Studer machines, the A820s and the A820 Multitrack, and also MCI. I had the privilege to work on an MCI machine, a JH24 machine, that had been owned by a major name in the recording industry. You know his name. I'm not going to dish the name out just yet, but my client bought the machine, and that now forms part of his studio complex. So I've had access access to those other multi-track machines. So that is about it. That's really the end of episode 0 of Press Play podcast. I hope you enjoyed it. As I said, please drop me a line, sign up on the website, www.realresilience.co.uk to get those documents. You can drop me a line at the email address, as I said, info@avresilience.co.uk. And I hope to have your company in future editions of the Press Play Real Resilience podcast, dedicated to all things reel-to-reel, tape recorders and tape.